On today's World Insight, China and Australia established diplomatic ties 50 years ago. With the latest visit by the Australian Foreign Minister to China, how much space is there for the bilateral relations to recover and grow in today's world?
Economic growth is much more important than any geopolitical games.
Hello and welcome to World Insight with me, Tian Wei. It has been 50 years since China and Australia established diplomatic ties. Despite their ups and downs during the past few years, China has become Australia's largest trading partner. Australia has become a key supplier for China's minerals and high-quality agricultural products. Also, China has been mapping out its new diplomatic ties after the 20th CPC National Congress. So where are the bilateral relations heading? Let's get insights from our panelists. I'm glad to be joined by Jeffrey Hawker, Head of the Politics and International Relations with Macquarie University. Also, Li Yong, Chief Researcher at the DNC think tank, and Chen Hong, Director of the Australian Studies Centre at the East China Normal University. Gentlemen, what a pleasure to see all of you. Professor Hawker, what do you see as the fundamental difference this meeting is likely to make in a relationship that certainly needs certain energy?
Yes. Well, we're individuals and we speak for ourselves, I know, but we're also representative, I think, of our nation's interests and the people within them. So I'm hoping we do reflect the emerging, re-established relationship between China and Australia, which is a very, very important thing. Certainly for Australia, I think it's important for China too.
Professor Chen, you've been doing research on China-Australia relations for a long time. Now, what does this visit by the Foreign Minister of Australia to China say to you?
Yeah, I think first of all, the visit by Australia's foreign minister should be regarded as the follow-up of the consensus reached during the summit in Bali between President Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Albanese, which of course is to promote improvements of bilateral relationship, and also this improvements is to be carried out in a top-down manner. So first, the functional department or ministry to make their move is obviously China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Australia's Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. So in other words, first of all, I don't think we need to overstate the significance of the visit, because it is in fact a natural move, a consequential move after the Bali summit. And on the other hand, I think we need to be aware that the reason why there had been a freeze of ministerial level contacts between our two countries was because of the damages wreaked upon the bilateral relations between our two countries by the previous Australian governments, namely the Turnbull government and in particular the Morrison government. Morrison Australia's Prime Minister brought nightmare to bilateral relations.
Professor Li, if you read the statements coming from both governments' top leadership, the Prime Minister of Australia, for example, the President and Prime Minister of China, for example, there is very keen attitude from both sides to try to reconnect in a way that reflects the nature of this relationship. Now, Professor Li, what do you see is the nature currently of this relationship?
First of all, we need to really recognize the importance of this visit, and it is, I think, a reflection of the mutual effort for both sides to recover the last orientation with regard to the bilateral relation. And of course, in the process, it is really a kind of an ice-breaking visit. And there are a lot of things for the two sides to really to catch up with each other. And from the joint statement, which is pretty short, but very informative in terms of the efforts being made during the strategic dialogue, and we can reasonably expect a good roadmap down the way with regard to the kind of a dialogue we are going to see, the kind of cooperation we are going to really to expect.
On that, we see Australia is a member of the Quad. Australia is also of other strategic alliance that the U.S. Has been keen to establish over the past few years, somewhat directed at China. Now, how is that balance being discussed in your home country right now, Professor Hawker, regarding how to make a strategic balance between China and the United States for Australia? What is the kind of political wisdom and visions that you would like to see in politicians from your country?
Well, now, my own position is not necessarily that of everyone else's. In fact,
of course.
No, there is quite a strong, and I'm sure everyone here on this panel knows, there's quite a strong division of opinion in Australia. There would be many people, and they're certainly to be found within the new government, hardly at all within the old government, that look at the Quad with doubt, that would want to raise questions about the nuclear submarines. We are, there's a pretty strong debate going on in this country that's highly critical of aspects, both the Quad and the AUKUS deal and the American bases and the port facilities, all of that. I don't say that's a majority opinion, it's certainly not, but it is very, very real. Now, I can't really say where that's going. It's not going to lead to a direct reversal of Australia's position, but someone like me, and I can only speak for myself, I see a long tradition in Australia of questioning our great and powerful friends, first Britain, then the United States, and wanting independence from the great and powerful friends. But let me say, that would include freedom from being just dependent on China. The independence for Australia means what it says, actually. It means as much freedom to manoeuvre as we can manage to achieve. And that does question in the way I've just done. Not everyone agrees, but I do sincerely say that the critical mode in Australia towards Quad and the Strategic Alliance and AUKUS and all of that is very real, very real. We are having a genuine debate in this country.
Countries around the world are trying to keep a balance to their biggest advantage in the relations with the United States, with China, and with other regional powers. Now, how do you understand the current stage of the discussion as described by Professor Hawker in Australia about this? And how is China looking at countries that can be members of the Quad and also AUKUS at this point in terms of a real political potential of relations with those countries, Australia included?
Yeah, I think for Australia, its alliance with the United States, I think will continue to dominate its foreign policies and also, security policies. Australia is an independent country, a sovereign country, and it has, its rights to form alliances or partnership with any country. China won't interfere with that and doesn't attempt to oppose any of such alliance. In the same manner, no country has any right to interfere with China's decision to form partnerships or even alliances with any other country. However, one bottom line is that Australia's alliance with the United States or any other country should not be formed at the expense of China's interests. I think the biggest mistake Morrison made in his handling or mishandling of the China relationship was that he lopsidedly embraced Washington's anti-China strategy and took China as the adversary. Throughout last year, we've been hearing battle cries, war threats from Canberra, the drums of war, for example. So I think Australia needs to regard China and also China's developments level-headedly. China is not Australia's enemy. In fact, China doesn't want to be the enemy of the United States or any other country. So one thing I feel quite pleased about is that to date, both countries, leaders of both China and Australia, has been reiterating the comprehensive strategic partnership.
Yeah.
Professor Lee, over the past half year, shall we say, we see some momentum between China and the United States. The last G20 summit, on the sidelines of which the presidents of China and the United States met, they put out quite positive consensus in words for both administrations to follow up with. Now, how well that is being followed up, that's leave to another discussion. But from now until the next US presidential election, there is a strategic time space for China-US relations to get not ever worse, dwindling as it did over the past few years. Now, what does that mean to the other countries who are either members of alliance with the United States of different sorts, and those who have been working closely with China on different projects all over the world? What does it say to them in terms of window opportunities? Of course, it could be quite fragile from time to time. Professor Lee.
I think in the case of a China-Australia relationship, the current effort reflect the shift of the strategy, if I may say so, that Australia has in relation with the United States, China, the region, and the world. And that actually requires very delicate dance from the Australian side, not to really anger the US while maintaining a reasonably healthy relationship with China. And the same is true, I think, for other countries, to really understand, I think, over the past few years, to understand how, they are supposed to really have their independent decisions, particularly when we are facing, common challenges and common headwinds that requires, concerted effort, from around the world, and confrontations, between China and the US and its allies are not going to be the solution. And particularly in this kind of a geopolitical tensions, imagined or created, by some of the some countries, are not really, not going to help improve the global security situation an iota.
The world is changing fast, taking all our lives with it. But we can change it too, by seeking answers to problems through discussions and debates. On World Insight, I ask direct questions to real people in the know, seek genuine answers, but respect diverse perspectives. Our live global debates tackle the most critical issues head-on. World Insight with Tian Wei go beyond the headlines.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
is the synergy of this relationship? As we know, when geopolitics and politics could be so disruptive from time to time, it is extremely important to have the fabric of the synergy still remaining there. Now, where do you see are the areas where synergy can be maintained and could also be the bouncing ground, shall we say, for the bilateral relations once it had its difficulties? Professor Hawkers.
Gee, this is the good, tough question, isn't it? It really is, because we can sweep away all sorts of negatives, but we do have to build positives.
Exactly.
I was going to say something, but I won't, about the problems, further about the problems, the nuclear subs and all of that. But put that aside, but that's just my opinion. What, even though many do share the critical views I harbour towards those sorts of things. But of course, the positive has to involve, again, it's a little bit of a cliche, but it's fundamentally true. It has to involve the mass of the people on each side. I mean, we're not going to get business to business cooperation. We're not going to get good, even family relations, surviving, unless we have positives that are benefiting each side in the relationship. I mean, I'm thinking of, there are many people of Chinese descent in Australia, it's getting up towards 6% population. That's nearly 1.5 million people. It's really important that there's a positive settlement around that issue. I mean, there is in everyone I know, but certain politicians stir the pot and make life very uncomfortable. Now that's got to stop. And in Australia's case, we need to value very greatly the contribution that all sorts of migrants, including those from China, are making. I think we could do a lot more in that regard. I know we're getting to people, so perhaps I won't say more about that. And also we have to build the business to business. So I do think, I'm not a business person, except in a minor way, but I do understand the significance of that, of allowing that to build in a natural way between economic partners that discover mutual interests. We can do so much more there than we've done, particularly on innovation and technology development, where Australia needs you and you need us, in my opinion. We both have issues there that we can assist each other on without regard to the US and the UK, as a matter of fact. But sorry, I'm just trying to build up the positives, people to people, business to business, but also there has to be a better understanding of our nations, their culture and their difference and why they're different and legitimately different. Australians need a lot more education about China in the modern period. We're not getting much of it anymore. And that is a very necessary thing for us to have. It's our responsibility, I think. Our educational institutions have to do a lot more.
Professor Chan, we have seen some recent developments from the Chinese side. For example, on the shifts of COVID prevention and control measures policies, and also with the latest Central Economic Work Conference on China's attitude for foreign investment, private sector, and etc. So how do you see the latest ways of saying things, at least from the Chinese side, and doing things as well, likely to provide some kinds of energy for synergy to be maintained and probably even strengthened between Australia and China, of course, in this case?
Yes, I think there's a dynamism, that has been at play between our two countries, in particular in the economic area. As we were saying, China is Australia's biggest trade partner, and also on the other hand, of course, China is also Australia's source country of international students and also tourists, as you were saying, that with the easing down of the travel restrictions after China has been optimizing and adjusting its COVID control measures. I think actually, well, by the end of the day, maybe early next year, restrictions of international travel will be lifted, so that actually there will be enormous need for Chinese students to seek, high quality international education overseas, and also Chinese holidaymakers will be, flocking to various parts of the world. So I think actually that being said, Australia need to be ready, for this, interaction, people-to-people relationship, because as we have been witnessing during the COVID years, in Australia, there were some kind of a negative trends, racial, racist, attacks on Asians. I think actually, this cultural, stability need to be maintained on part of Australia.
Yeah.
Chinese tourists and also students to have a good experience. And also, I think actually there are also some other areas for cooperation. For example, like green energy. Australia is a country reputed to be a country of sunshine. And so solar power is actually really, coming to, various areas in Australia. And China is obviously the biggest manufacturer of solar panels, windmills, So clean energy is obviously, one area that both countries can cooperate, so that actually, also blue economy, clean energy, a lot of areas. I think, the new time will be offering new opportunities for new, fronts of cooperation between our two countries.
Professor Lee, on trade, for example, I know you're a trade expert. China-Australia trade relations did not suffer that much as their political relations, in fact, over the past years. Not only that, we also see some kind of strong momentum of trade interactions. How do you understand the complexity of trade now, Professor Lee? On the one hand, geopolitics does have an impact. Pandemic, other global issues does have an impact on the global value chains and global supply chains. On the other hand, it seems that the recovery of the global economy, which is crucial for everybody's interest is here, also depends on how countries' economies can work together. So how do you see the complexity of trade and the very different nature of trade now? It's not just a sheer number anymore.
It's very good that you use the word complexity. And one of the features of a complexity is uncertainty, because it is very difficult to understand the dimension of complexity given the current geopolitical gaming. And but on the whole, I think countries are starting to realize that it is important to work together. Disruption of a supply chain is not going to benefit anybody. So this is, I think, is a consensus being built. And with regard to the role of China in this, complex situation, I think, China's growth is going to provide opportunities and momentum as an important part of the world, not to mention about the second largest economy, are going to contribute to the global economic recovery. And right now, because of other factors being kicked in to affect the global economic recovery, somehow, it might be halted. And if some of the complex factors can be removed by working together, by countries working together, probably we're going to see a more positive working together type of a environment. And I think that is most needed scenario. And whoever in this world, economic growth is much more better, much more important than any geopolitical games.
What do you say when you are referring to other factors? What are the other factors? What are you trying to say?
Yeah, for example, the other factors like the hiking of the interest rate by the U.S. and the current geopolitical tensions, the energy shortages in Europe as a result of the Russia-Ukraine crisis, all of those factors, are coming together to have an impact on global economy, and those factors are making the world situation more unpredictable than being predictable.
Okay, so finally, Professor Hawker, also on trade, how do you see its complex role in the way it could play in bilateral and certainly international relations? But on the other hand, it's shifting of roles from earlier times to now between China and Australia.
Yeah, well, now, look, in the current situation, it seems fairly clear, at least to me, that, of course, there are some Australian producers, they're fairly niche, that are still upset about restrictions on their imports, the old lobsters and wine and so forth. But to be honest, and we acknowledge it in Australia, they are fairly niche. They've, to some extent, rebalanced. So in the bigger picture of trade, I guess where most people are expecting, with the normalisation of relations, the overall trade picture is going to get back into balance. That's slightly optimistic, but I think we are all looking for that to happen. But there's a few steps first, but then the question you're asking actually becomes very acute, because we have to go beyond the old relationship. But I think we've said a bit about that already, really. We have to forge some of the, I don't want to put everything on technology. It's people, their willingness to cooperate, governments that facilitate and make things possible. That's why the meetings are so important. But with the new technology, we do have mutual opportunities. There's no doubt about that. But we have to solve some of these. That's why I don't underrate the political problems. We have to massage them. We have to talk. We have to have some mutual respect, and then we can let people get on with it, I think. So I'm very, very hopeful, but I can still see a number of hurdles that have to be got over. Of course they do.
Jeffrey Hawker, Li Yong, and Chen Hong. Gentlemen, thank you so much. And that's all the time we have for today. If you'd like to know more, search World Insight or check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. I'm Tian Wei on behalf of the team. Thanks for being with us. Bye for now.